Welcome back, everyone. I'm Carrington-Russell, award-winning author of action-packed dark fantasy romance, and I have a very special guest for you today. We are talking to a very well-loved voice actor who has narrated over 600 audiobooks, which is absolute mind-blowing. We are covering authors such as Stephen King, Sylvia Day, Nora Roberts, Hunter Blaine, Bella Forrest, Addison Moore, and the list just continues. With a phenomenal amount of accolades, including Audible's 2012 Narrator of the Year, we are talking to the one and only Luke Daniels. How are you today?
Wow, nailed it. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm wonderful. I'm happy to be here and talk about the industry and books. And thanks for thinking of me and inviting me over.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm not gonna lie, I did a lot of stalking and I was just like, this guy's brilliant. Like, not only in your work and in your profession, but also you're hilarious. Like, I've started following you on social media because you're funny. Congratulations. You have
Thank you. I really do think humor is the number, like, to me, that's what I want to see. And like, a genuine person's humor that like comes through is their character. It's like your author's voice. So I appreciate you saying that. I try to keep things light, and I'm not like a huge social media person, but I definitely see its importance because I get such, like, I would never have had this opportunity right now was it not for social media. I mean, you interviewed Hunter Blaine, I think, who's an author I worked with, so there's that connection too, but it just opens the world up so much more. So that's good to hear. Thank you for checking me out. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Hunter Blaine only had amazing things to say about you. Honestly, he kept talking about you. I thought it was a bromance or a crush. I don't know what was happening, but I was all for it.
Mutual respect. Yes, yeah.
I love it. So take me back to the start. How did you even start on this journey?
Well, it's a funny story because my older brother, I have two older brothers, he narrated audiobooks. We come from a family of actors. My parents were and stuff. They worked in theater and taught for decades. And so we were kind of ensconced in stories. And then in Michigan, there is a company called Brilliance, which is now owned by Amazon and Audible. But they produced audiobooks back in the tape days, back in the early, you'd go to the truck stop and you'd get, or Cracker Barrel, and you could get them in those giant, books. And the company, long story short, the company made good because they got the technology to reverse the tape so that you could have double-sided, so that you could put more spoken content on one tape and not have these giant catalogs. So anyways, my brother worked for them. He was about 10 years older than me. And when I went through school for acting and theater and got my graduate degree, I always in the back of my mind thought I would love to do that job. It was, he had gone on to be a lawyer and done other things, but it was always something that called to me. And so once I got out of school and had student debt, I was like, I need money. And then I realized, oh, you just went to school for acting. So that doesn't really work. But I was lucky enough to audition for them and get in with Brilliance, that audio company. And I really cut my teeth there for like 5 years. This is my home studio in my house. It's an actual prefab modular unit that comes from Barcelona. So that's what everybody does nowadays. But back, I was right on the cusp between the digital age of everyone having Audible on their phone and everybody listening on CDs in their car. And so I kind of got a really good, almost a second like graduate degree by being in a studio environment, working with other narrators, helping to direct productions, helping to be part of it. They still had directors there. So it was like, I got like a master class, but I was also working and starting to, do more books and it built up. So after about, I'd say 5 years is when I struck out and started doing stuff solely from my home studio. And that's pretty much how I do it all now. I still like to travel to other studios if I can. Some great companies like Penguin Random House, they always will bring me out if I want to, because they have studios in New York and LA. And that's a great way to get out of the kind of insular environment I live in. But that hasn't been an option as much in the last couple of years. So lucky to have this avenue to be able to still do the work.
Absolutely. Already, I have so many questions for you leading off that.
Shoot.
This one I'm curious about is, when you first got into this, did you ever think that audio would boom as it has now? did you, because I know for a long time authors on this side of the fence were thinking, is this something that's going to go ahead? But every year it's just increased massively with the amount of readership and listeners. Did you expect that boom, or you weren't sure how it would move forward?
That's a really good question, because it actually makes me think about what the expectations were at the time. And for me, my personal expectation was do a good job so I get hired again and can continue to support myself this way, because I really liked the work right off the bat. But the more I worked in the industry, the more I saw, holy crap, I likened it to the Wild West days, or like early silent film stuff, where there's no like end to what the possibilities, because nobody had fully explored it yet. There's radio shows that have been huge, all through the history of radio, but now felt like a time with everyone having a phone or something, and an ability to listen. And so many people, I saw myself, even at the time, I was traveling constantly. So I was listening a lot, and I felt that kind of zeitgeist, almost that beginning feeling of, this is something with a lot of cool potential. And it was right down my alley, because I like stories and acting and all that stuff. So I was naturally attuned to it. But I think I had an inkling that this could go somewhere, and saw that. And it was perfectly timed right at that kind of big burst when Audible got on the scene. And then there's all these other companies now, and people are listening and having subscriptions, and the serialization too. I remember thinking, oh, this is really smart. Like, a lot of the books when I started were one-off books. Now 99% of the books I do are part of a series. Part of it's the genre I work in, but also people listening want to keep listening. And so that's another really good indicator that this has some staying power, because it's not like a one-off thing where they're like, well, I listened to an audiobook, and there are people like that, but there is a huge market of people that listen, and they kind of get hooked to that feeling of seeing something in your head and having someone kind of guide you through it. It's so unique in the media industry. It just seemed like something to really put your horses bet on it. So it's turned out well, but I think it'll be around for a while. There's obviously got to be some bubble, but it hasn't reached it yet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't think so.
I'm curious then, what's the industry like for you, I guess, because I know in the author world, it can be very just us in our little bubble doing our own thing, but then as soon as you reach out, there's a massive community around us as well, and we're all friends with fellow authors. Is it the same amongst narrators?
I think very similar, and there's a lot of crossover I found from narrators and authors, mainly because working together only helps the author's vision and audiobook success. But I think they're very similar types. The people that are successful in the audiobook narrating industry are very similar to people who are successful as an author. We are good at working on our own and making sure we're the ones that are our boss, trying to make sure we're getting the work done. We have to create stuff that's kind of there's no other stimulus. We're not in like a play with other actors who can give us something to riff on. We're just kind of coming up with it just with the text. So I've seen a lot of good that I think that there's like kind of a comfort there. And at the beginning, really, when we went through publishers, you didn't contact the author. And this is like 12 years ago, I'd say. That was kind of frowned on, but not like terrible, but there wasn't, it was just more like, if the publisher has the job, they want to be the person communicating. But now that's less so with independent publication and that kind of thing. Hunter actually sent me a beeper, so that goes off whenever he wants me to go. No, I'm joking, but that would be awesome if he had like a Batman beeper that went off.
I was falling for that because after meeting that, like, it's possible. Anything's possible.
Secret beeper, yeah. No, so the communication is really good, but the people that are narrators, I find very well read. So they're kind of intelligent. They're good. They're that actor sort where they're good storytellers, so they're fun to be around. But they're also a little more, I'd say, introverted than your general actor, because they tend to work so much on their own. So it's been, but it's a small group, as you probably know with authors. Once you get in there, you start to see that everybody knows everybody in a way. And it's the same way there, but that's changing too, because the industry's growing so much. And now you have, focus on podcast type serialization of that stuff, the fiction stuff, the celebrity narrators and that kind of thing, which has been such a great thing that I never understood why some people don't like it, because it's so cool that they take an interest. It raises the bar for everybody in my opinion.
I'm gonna say too, I know as an author, you do ideally find somebody who, one, usually has experience, but also it's such a pro to find somebody who has a following as well, such as yourself. You have a massive following. You've been doing this for many years. You've got many accolades because you're good at what you do. And so that's definitely a benefit for an author, obviously making sure that you're the right voice for them. But I know that's what a lot of authors now are looking for, somebody who has those credentials and a following that you can possibly bring to the party as well. It's basically like a marriage almost in that sense.
And I think that's what's cool about the industry too, is it's open to that, as far as now coinciding with this bubble of interest in audio stories in one shape or another. There's also this accessibility to authors, that you can write to an author and sometimes get a response that, when I was a kid coming up, if I thought of writing Stephen King, it'd be like, well, yeah, he might see it, but it's not like, but now it's like there's access, you can access these people. And I think it's kind of cool, especially, and I don't know what it'd be like but I found for the most part, people are less troll-like, I think, because they like to read. Again, it all comes back down to liking words and reading. It's just a certain type of person. So the fans and the author and the narrator can form this perfect little trifecta to help lift a book. And I've had that before, authors say, I've never considered audio, and then come back and say 6 years later, audio is what I sell all my books on now. Like, I still sell print, but the one that I get the reason I can keep doing stuff is because of the audio. And so it's been, I think everybody's kind of keyed into that.
From what you've seen, is there any particular genre that you've noticed has done really well? And also, out of curiosity, what is your favorite genre to play with?
That's a good question. What's my favorite genre to play with? Is in narrating might be different than what would be my favorite genre to if I was going to read on my own. Although I am lucky that I do love, fantasy, urban fantasy, sci-fi. Those are mainly what I'm doing right now. And I do love those. And then to answer your question, the thing right now that's popping is the lit RPG. Again, I'm biased because I'm doing a lot of them. There's other things that are popping, but the one I'm seeing a lot of is the lit RPG. It marries perfectly in with the people who like video games. They like to be online. They like story. And I was never a big gamer growing up. I was always the guy, when you play Nintendo 64 Bond, I'd be stuck in the basement and everybody'd be like, where's Luke? He hasn't gotten any kills, because I was lost. I couldn't find my way out of it. But I always enjoyed it. So learning about them through these books, I realized there's such a crossover of how a story is told in a video game and its possibilities to be told in a literature or a book form or in a novelization. So those have been popping a lot, and I've seen a lot of response too. But again, I think it's the people that are listening are the people that like to respond online to things. So those have been really big. Romance has always been big, and it stays strong. It's still huge. And they're also bumping up more. The audio narrators in romance are a little more higher tier as far as kind of the fan adulation and the following and that kind of thing. And they listen to stuff specifically because they have a favorite narrator. And that's cool. I mean, that's just great. And that kind of personal selection, I think, is why people keep coming back for more, because they feel like they've got a personal connection, and they do.
What you do is very mysterious to me. I'm like, okay, I know that you take a book, you narrate it, and it comes back and it's a magical end product. But what actually happens behind the scenes?
Well, so you'll get a script sent by a casting director or a publisher or an author. Now, that can be any number of avenues. For instance, I have a contract with one publisher where I do a book a month for them. And so they tell me a couple weeks ahead of time, this is what we're doing, or a month ahead of time, we schedule it all that way. I have authors that I have the same kind of relationship with, where I know to expect something Generally, you're going to get a script a month, 2 weeks. I've done it before where you've gotten it like the day, and then they made changes. That's really rare, but it's all over the board. Once you get the script, if we're doing a home setup, which most of them are, it's largely in our hands now. There'll be some contact that's making sure you're not screwing the pooch and just forgot about it, saying, do you have files? But once we work here in the studio recording everything, I have a system set up outside the studio, so the sound from all the machinery and stuff, the processing and the actual computer are outside it. In here is just the microphone and a monitor. So I can record and be in here with my script, cut it as I do it. It's called a punch and roll. So if I'm talking, oops, I screwed up, I can hear back, I can hit it real quick, hear back like 2 sentences before, cut in and start going again. So it's a very fluid process. And the more you do it, the better you get at keeping that fluidity. And the reason you do that, some people do what's called a raw record, where you just read. Oh, I screwed up. Read. And someone has to then go back and listen, and you mark, and they have to pull all those mistakes out. That's generally not what's done in the industry. The punch and roll is what they want. So I send them chapters. So chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, that gets sent to the company that has an editor and a proofer, who then go through and listen and read along, and they see where I screwed up everything. And then I get fixes back and I plug those in, and then it gets sent to be processed. And that's kind of like the post-production side of a film. This is where they do all the sound tweaking and make sure that the and the heads and tails are all correct, and then it's uploaded to whatever server that it's going to be distributed from. So at that point, after I've done the fixes, I no longer have any touch on that. But that's basically it. And so there's always there's usually like 3, someone listening, and then like a third kind of final pass. It depends. Some publishers do more and some do less, but on average, there's at least me, and then there's somebody else on the back end listening to make sure I didn't do the wrong character or make a mistake that I just whizzed by and didn't catch it in a moment.
That is a lot. So on top of that as well, I am curious as to what methods you use to embody your character, because sometimes you're doing multiple characters as well. Is there some weird quirky practice you do on a mountain before you come back down, and what works?
Exactly. No, you nailed it. I climb the mountain every morning. I sit on top, and there's this goat. And the goat tells me what characters I should do today. And then I come down, I have a hot little tea, and then I start my day. I wish that's what happened. Usually coffee, perilous amounts of coffee. Early on, I cut milk out, so I just drink black coffee, because milk is it makes you kind of phlegmy, doesn't do good for and also makes those mouth noises that if there's one thing, the highest compliment I could ever get would be there's very little mouth noises, because I can't stand that. So I got off on a tangent on mouth noises, but it does bother me. See, there's certain things, like I wouldn't wear this bracelet if I was recording. I wouldn't wear this jacket for sound. But character-wise, I'm really lucky that I work with publishers and authors who, and this has changed. It wasn't necessarily the way, but I'd say about 8 years back, most people started instituting asking the author to come up with like a list of their characters, how they kind of thought of them in their head. If they wanted to go all out, some people would be like, it's Morgan Freeman from Shawshank Redemption crossed with such a, you know what I mean? Or they could just be male, kind of low. You know what I mean? Whatever, but that really helps, because then you can just at least know I didn't totally jump the shark by choosing something that the author didn't intend. And then that gives me an idea. And then I do what's called a cold read, which is not, I don't recommend it. I didn't do it for lots and lots of years, but I do it now where I haven't read the stuff ahead of time. But I'm also in an environment where if I get confused, I can stop and then go read ahead and then come back to it. And the character stuff ahead of time, I do have kind of like I'd say like a stable, I think of it in my mind, of voices, and they repeat, and then I'll tweak them or modify them depending on the character. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of different ways I can do a deep voice, kind of brutish guy, right? You can have all sorts of accents or rhythm, or is he a slow guy? So you're taking it off of what the author is giving you. Is this a scary moment, or is this a funny, lighthearted moment? And trying to build that kind of tone that supports the story. So it all comes back to what exactly the tone should be right now. Should it be light and fun? And then how can you subvert that so that you make a choice that maybe is unexpected? You didn't expect the small little mouse to have a real deep baritone voice. Author didn't say otherwise, but it's kind of fun and it supports the moment that's a funny moment, right? So some of that you can bring into it yourself, but most of all decisions are based on what's in the text. And a good author will tell you, because just like the reader's reading for the first time, they're going to set the scene and say, it was dark, there was an alley, he heard a voice from behind. He jumped and screamed. You're not going to be like, hey, what's up, guys? Like, it just, you got to do something kind of back. And then, although, maybe if that was the tone and he screamed and then there was a clown standing there and he's like, ah. So, and I read ahead a little bit as I do it, but character stuff too, from the practice and doing it so much is, and the going back and forth, I really enjoy. So that switch, to me, those scenes always fly. And then the long stacks of narration, I have to be more conscientious, because those are when I can start to feel like I go a little more robotic. But I never have an issue with the character stuff. I mean, I have issues where I'm like, I just can't nail that Australian accent. It's not really sounding quite right, mate. So I try to back it up a little. Yeah. So some of them I struggle with. I couldn't do Australian to save my life the first 5 years I worked. And then I would forcibly make characters Australian. If it's some sci-fi thing and they're out in the cosmos, and there's a gunner or whatever, they could be Australian. So I put them in to try to work that voice more so I get better at it.
What would your tips be then for first-time authors? I imagine you find there's a lot of common mistakes, perhaps, approached. Luke, can you narrate my audiobook? And then there's probably many common mistakes or misconceptions that they have. So what tips would you have for authors, just so they better understand the expectation as to what's needed?
That's a good question. I think, again, I've been lucky because the authors, I don't know if it's just in general, but are pretty intelligent people. I think you have to be to craft a book. So they've been pretty savvy as far as getting on quick of like what's needed. And a lot of them too, now I've noticed, are listeners. So they have very specific likes and dislikes because they're actually into it. And that's really cool too, because they have an opinion formed over experience of actually listening. But I think if you're first into it, there's obviously accepting that an audio book is a great opportunity to get your story out there. It's a version of your story, not necessarily exactly your story. Every word should be exactly there, but you are, and someone else is kind of interpreting it through their own personal muse. So, having some flexibility with your characters, but if there are ones you don't want to be flexible, being specific about that and saying, I really hear this as like a standard North American, just kind of deep voice. And I've worked with that, like with several authors who we've kind of fine-tuned stuff ahead of time. And that's fine. I love it, because then I know I'm doing the right thing, instead of like 6 weeks later, check in, like, what'd you think? And they're like, ... And then it's erased. And it's like, ... And you're like, oh boy. So giving instruction is okay. Giving your input is, most people I know that do this really appreciate that, because we work so solitary. So anyone that gives us a handout, it's like, yes. We're like Gollum. It's like, please, more. So that's helpful. Be attached. Be involved as much as you want to be involved. If you don't want to be involved, the good thing about having a professional is we can do it 100%. Like, I don't ever need to speak to the author. If that's something like they're not even interested in, that's legitimate too. And that gets done a lot. It's not that they're not interested in cashing the check, but they just think you're the professional, do what you think is best. I've had a lot of that stuff, and that's fine. And then I think it's like anything, it's the money side of things is always tricky and murky. Yes, there is money to be made in audio. Is it going to happen right out of the gate? How much is appropriate to put forward as far as securing a talented narrator, as opposed to just using your buddy Carl, who says like, I got a great voice, girls tell me all the time, choosing to go professional in that regard takes some sort of investment, and then mitigating that with a risk so that that you're not putting yourself in something that you're not going to get anything back from, which is no reason to do that either. Yeah, some things. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a really good avenue. It's a really good way, and people listen a lot. And there's so many people that can't read, not because they don't want to read, but either they have sight problems or they just have a hard time doing it. So it's opening up so many different people to your story. And then you've got the people that like to read and listen. So there's kind of a win-win in my opinion, but yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I love it. I mean, that's why we asked the question. Now, speaking of opening up to our story, you yourself have actually written a book. You wrote a memoir called Unspoken. So I would love to talk about that. And also if you plan on writing any other books.
I'd like to. Writing, as I'm guessing it's you have to be really disciplined. And I've learned to be really disciplined in my narrating, and I have not learned to be disciplined in my writing. The story I wrote for Audible Originals, Unspoken, was one about the passing of my son. So it was definitely like this story I had to get out. And I have other ideas and stories and things that I'd like to pursue, but it didn't have that immediacy. As far as I'd gone through about 5 years of grief, so I felt that it was at least appropriate that I could go back and have some sort of perspective on it. It wasn't too close to the incident to where I really wouldn't have been able to do it anyways, and it wasn't too far where I'd lost some of the immediacy of the feelings and what I went through. So the timing for that felt really right. And at this point, yeah, I'd love to do some stuff, especially stuff that's a little less personal. And I always want it to be personal, but you know what I mean? Some made up stories would be fun. And I have some planned, but the discipline for me is tough especially because right now my schedule's such that I work so much in this booth, and I've done it for so long that now when I'm not working, I can't really be solid. Like I go outside and I work in the yard constantly because that's the exact opposite of what I'm doing. And I find that if I go to sit and write, it feels the same. You know what I mean? There's only so much of that kind of psychic and creative energy I feel like I have every day. So yeah, but the book was really a great experience. It was really hard, obviously, to write about grief and such a subject that's so difficult as a child that passed. But the opportunity to take my position as a small time influencer of people that listen and be able to tell a story that I hope connected people, and I've seen like a lot of great results from it. Of kind of letting my position to be able to put that out there help other people kind of feel like their stories are have an opportunity to be told, or feel some kinship in there, because it's a very debilitating and isolating experience. And it doesn't matter if you lost your cat or you lost your kid. I mean, I swear to God, grief is grief, and it all freaking sucks. So and I also feel like it was something that I couldn't really talk about. I feel like we have a real weird, I even myself had such a weird like feeling about talking about that. As soon as you mention it, the air goes out of the room and the temperature drops. But I felt like that wasn't right, that to honor these people, we need to be free to talk about it. So this was a format that gave me that ability. And it took about a year to write it and then record it. And I was just really grateful that Audible gave me the opportunity, and I had an editor that was helping me with, guiding me along and staying positive. And they were like super, I couldn't have asked for a better way to write a first kind of piece. So it went very well. I was very pleased, very lucky and grateful. And I know Finn, that's my son that passed, is very happy. I mean, for 5 years, I would just see him sitting there, just like looking at me like, when, like, come on, I went through all that. You're going to just sit here and watch Transformers again? Really? Like, so now he's like, all right, good job, Dad.
I thank you for sharing your story.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. One thing that I love about memoirs, or even for anyone who writes in general, I find I do the same in my books, and there's particular topics or themes or whatever it may be that are quite therapeutic as well. And we don't realize how much it's helping us in the process. Obviously, we have a story to tell, but as soon as you start writing that down, it's, for me personally, and I wonder if you feel the same, it's almost uplifting because you're able to actually fine tune and go through those emotions and just let it all on a page. And I find that it's quite uplifting to tell your story. Did you find the same process?
Yes, I think during the process was a lot of back and forth of that. It would be uplifting when I finally got something out, and I was like, that's good. I can keep that. I can work with that. I'm feeling good about that. And then after it was done, definitely I felt a lot of weight off of just, as a parent, when you lose your child, you feel so much guilt anyways. So this was just a little lessening of the burden, of like, I did one more thing to try. And the whole book, there is a whole thing about try again. I did the poem at his funeral, because it was that thing of just keep going and keep trying. So yeah, I think it's been cathartic. That's such a funny word. It seems so. It's been enriching, I think, is what I like better, and a way to connect with him again and other people too. And then I think the number one thing that came from it that surprised me was how many people wrote when they'd write reviews or connect with me after they'd listened, and then they'd share how they connected because their sister died when they were young, or their son had a scare when he was 5, but he's okay now, or you know what I mean? Like, it was just eye-opening. And I talk about in the book that there's a club, and the grief is a club, and nobody ever wants to join it, but once you're in, like, you can't get out. And just realizing that everybody's in that club, and you may not be there yet, but I'm sorry to say it's something you will. So I felt a kinship with people that I hadn't felt before, that I think was good come out of it, for sure. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for being brave to tell your story again. And also, I'm so glad that you were able to not only find that kinship, but also create a platform for other people to share their experiences and find people where they could have a community of support. So I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who have listened to that audio and read that book, and thank you. So you're a legend.
I love that. You guys always use that word. That's one I steal. I do steal. I let legend use it a little more than us. I just love it. Legend. That's a good word. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I think that there's an ability that people have, and like you said, to tell their story, and writing it and the catharsis of that. I mean, what do you think people have been doing for millions of years is writing in journals, right? And it releases, if you put it down on paper, that's one release. And then if it's told to somebody else, that's a second release. And so it's also a way to kind of enrich. So yeah, thank you for bringing it up. I think it's hard. People are like, oh, I don't know how to touch that. But if I wrote a book about it, I'm obviously okay talking about that. So it shows some courage on your part. So good for you.
Thank you. Well, I just felt like I find it always interesting why people feel like, because it is, as you said, a lot of people don't want to talk about grief. A lot of people don't want to share that experience. And so I think it's so brave to do it. And I think it's not for everyone, but I think more people should, because you do find kinship through it. So I just find it super courageous. So I'm so glad that you were able to share it. I really am. Then I guess it might have already answered my next question. I was going to ask what has been the most challenging book or series for you to narrate, and what has been the most rewarding, but perhaps that's already answered it.
No, well, that's a good, I was actually thinking about that, and I do think narrating his book, Unspoken, for Audible, was the most challenging experience, because it was like I had to lose all the kind of affectations maybe I use, they just wouldn't work in something so personal. So funny story about that, I actually narrated it, and Audible was like, this is great, this is so good, would you be opposed to doing it again? And we have a director. And at first I was like, I hid under the bed for a few days, and then I realized that, one, can't hurt, one. I've always, as an actor, you always say yes to help. It always is a good thing instead of getting your back up. And two, like doesn't he deserve it? And again, I talk in the book that Finn was quite a trickster. So it felt like the perfect kind of ending of like, you thought you were done, Dad? No. It wasn't quite good enough. And it did help. They brought in a fantastic director, and he didn't do anything, but he was, it was all virtual. And I didn't see him, but he was on the line during the sessions. And that actually was wonderful, because then there was a person in the room, which to help take some of the artifice out of again, you're feeling these barriers. I can be Star Blasto, the guy with a Texas accent that lives on, Uranus. But to be myself, it was a little difficult to get that naturalness, I think, and break down some of that artifice. And so having someone there, so that was difficult. Actually, that was probably going to be I have a backup answer, but that was probably going to be my answer for most uncomfortable or awkward kind of situation. But actually, the actual situation was great. The director was fantastic, and I realized quickly that it was a better idea. There was more immediacy in my delivery and tone, and there was someone there just to be like, "Good, that was really good." You know what I mean? And that feels really nice. So it actually worked out well. So what you're hearing is the second version. There is another version out there. Maybe in 20 years we'll put that one out.
Oh, that's actually wow. I love too that you have to, and obviously you're going to keep growing every tier, you're going to keep having success, but at the level of success that you're at already, that you are still able to go, okay, I'm open to this, I'm learning something new. I absolutely love seeing that, because I think people can get quite stifled in their career when they just think, absolutely not, I'm not changing a thing, or I don't know how to say it without seeming rude, but that you're still open to growing and developing yourself and your career. I love seeing that.
I think it's just a separation from, I still feel it's all ego, right? But I can register that's ego, and that doesn't last. Like, I feel embarrassed, right? Even telling it, like, you didn't get it right on the first time. But there's something humbling and humanizing to it. And it also just shows that, like, I was that dedicated to keep going with it. So it's an opportunity instead of a setback. And it's all about the perspective shift on that. But yeah, I told you a couple of days before I got to that. Yeah. The first couple of days I was like, what? No. Yeah. But I've learned, just let that ride it out. It'll be okay.
Is there any particular authors or even producers or whoever it may be that you have worked with in your career and thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm working with this person. This is a dream come true. Who are the people that you've worked with and had that experience with?
The biggest oh shit moment for me, which I don't know if we have to bleep that out, but was when I got to do some Kerouac, and I was a big fan growing up. And so when they called for that, he's long gone, but to me, to be able to out loud felt so one of those full circle moments of being a kid, reading him at 18 years old when I'm driving for the first time, and then thinking it's so cool, and then getting paid to actually read his stuff. That to me was a big cool moment. I got to meet Neil Gaiman at an Audi's, but we're going to jump to the question about my most awkward. That's one of them. I was this time I'd gone to the Audi's, and it's the award ceremony for audiobooks, and he does a lot of audiobook work. And he was actually one of the first people when the industry was kind of blowing up. He was real instrumental in that. His audiobooks were great, and he narrated them. And he was one of those just people that are so talented. So I basically acted like a big bonzo going up to him, waiting, like literally stalking him around this like fancy New York, museum or wherever the event was taking place, just flop sweat. Like, I'm a sweater when I get nervous. Like, I just probably beat red and just sweating, this like 6'2" guy, just kind of following him around, waiting for him not to be surrounded by people so I could go up and do whatever. I didn't have a plan. It was more just like, get close. And I remember standing there, and he was almost done talking to a couple people, and there's a woman next to me, and I'm just like, it's coming, I'm gonna do it. And she's like looking at me, and I look at her, and she's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm just an audiobook narrator, but I'm just here to see Neil. Oh, do you know him? And she's like, I'm his wife. And I was like, oh, Amanda. And I was like, you do know him. And I can tell she was just looking at me like, it's probably not the first time that's happened, but still, some 6'2", 30-year-old white guy just like flipping out, meeting some author. But he was very gracious and kind after that, and didn't comment on my flop sweat at all. So it was a good story. But the best part of it is I looked down at that point and she had no shoes on, and I was like, she's the coolest person I've ever seen.
She just got to the point where she doesn't care anymore. She doesn't have to.
Yeah, she's like this. She got no shoes on. Yeah, and a backpack. She had a backpack and no shoes on.
Oh, that's so cool. So what? Because you have had so many accolades. Like I have a little list here, but I'm going to read them off. Let's do some shout outs of your victories and make you super uncomfortable.
Boy.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, thanks.
I mean, that wasn't me, but 13 Audiophile Earphone Awards, 4 Audie nominations, and being Audible's 2012 Narrator of the Year. That's mind-blowing and amazing. So, and I'm sure there's been many more. So I want to know what was the most personal to you that was just the best accomplishment, and most importantly, how you celebrated it.
I think there's I've been fortunate that there's a lot of moments. I was part of I was inducted into the Audible Narrator Hall of Fame, I think, in 2016. And there was 20 of us, and they brought us out, and they had a nice ceremony, and I got to bring my daughter. And I actually gave a speech there where I talked about Finn. And that's how I got connected with the editors there, and then wrote the book about it. So that was a really good one. It was a huge moment of like, wow, well, I remember my daughter was like, do you get like any money with that? Or is that like, are you going to retire now? And I was like, well, no. It's a major award. So that felt good, but then it led into something even better. So it was that opportunity that grew out of it that made it even more of a special event. And then I think when I kind of got to meet, and I did some live readings with authors and got to meet fans, was really cool. And I have a couple that they're just meeting these people. They become kind of your part of your lives, and it's kind of enriching in a way too. That's my word for the night. I think you should have like a little counter every time I say it. I really like that word. So they've been, they sent, a picture that they made. I hang it on my wall of me and Finn, and I directed a play, and they took their kids and drove 4 hours to come see the play with their like 6 children who all listen together as a family and stuff. So those moments have been like really I never would have expected that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I want to talk a little bit about your lives as well, because as I said, you are on the social medias and hilarious. So I follow you now on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, hurrah. And you do a lot of lives as well, so you're so engaged with your followers. And I wanted to know why you thought it was so important to be present on social media, to have that engagement with them.
I think it's twofold. One, I clearly recognize the business side, and that now even my dad wrote a book recently, and the first thing they ask is, are you on social media? How many followers do you have? So I clearly saw that was when we were starting out, I saw the connection between that and having a good career, being accessible to people and putting out a decent message, I think can only help. And then the other side was that kind of connection, especially spending so much time on my own. And I'm lucky I have a wonderful family and a beautiful wife, but the having an ability we don't get to take a bow at the end like you do in a play. And so as much as it sounds self-congratulatory or whatever, it does feel good to know that people are listening. And so a connection with somebody that way is still a good and positive connection that I feel very fortunate to have. So it's kind of a given. It goes both ways. Like, I think that they're excited, but I'm just as excited to meet somebody that likes what I do. I mean, I haven't soured to that notion at all. To me, that's like the highest form of compliment. And so getting an opportunity to share a few words or a holiday greeting or a funny joke or something like that, you kind of form relationships, and it just helps. And I think it's a positive thing, and I think it helps with the business, but it also brings people together in a way where they're excited about. It's bringing people together over something they're excited about, right? I like this story. Or even I had a guy write me, great guy, and he wrote, he was from Scotland. He was like, mate, your Scottish needs some serious work. I was like, dude, I appreciate that. Like, it's tough. I'm trying, but that's one of the ones I struggle with. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't expect you to respond so nicely. he's like, I really appreciate that. And I was like, yeah, well, I appreciate you reaching out. I was like, you got any pointers? And so he goes to this whole list of like, well, you'd never say this, you'd never say, and he goes to the whole thing and gave me the thing. It was a great little exchange. And they're both like, all right, see you later, and had a good exchange out of it. But it was helpful, it was somebody saying, I like you, but mate, this really annoys me.
So what would you say then your most memorable reader or fan interaction moment has been?
Well, the lady, I think it was one of my first ones. There was a lady there that had a fake baby that she wanted me to sign, but she insisted it was a real baby, and she talked to it like it was a real baby. And she was very sweet. And I definitely signed that baby. But I would not sign a live baby. No, I don't think I would do that. But it was a fake baby, so it felt okay. And she was very nice, and her boyfriend was with her. Maybe they were just trying to, I mean, who knows? It's their own, everybody's got something. They're not hurting anybody. So they were very nice. And then like I said, those families, I had another in, I think at like Harvard bookstore, we got to do a talk, and some dad and his son flew out from Idaho just for the talk, and they were excited because they shared it together. So seeing like the family stuff where they listen in the car together on the way to school or whatever, and they get into it, and then you see the parents kind of excited because they're getting to, and their kids are excited. And I don't know, that's such a heartwarming, hallmark, wonderful thing that happens, especially when it centers around reading. It's so, even if it's listening, it's still reading is my end story. So it feels like a very wholesome thing to be a part of.
Do you ever do any sort of collaborations with authors, say if they're going to conventions and then you're both on a panel together, or have you had experiences like that?
Yeah, before all the craziness, I was doing some in there in LA, SOVAs, which is the Society for Voice Arts Award. And I've done some through ACX, where there'll be a couple panels. I did a panel for romance audiobook narrators at a convention down in Virginia. And so those have been real fun because and we do conventions. There are like narrator things and stuff, and there is kind of a tight narrator community of people that work consistently, and they're all really nice, good people. So we get together, and then it's just a banger because nobody gets out of their booth, and then one time a year there's 20 introverts all like party.
I love that.
Or asleep.
I feel like I just want to come and document that one convention on the side. It's like, and then he did this, and she said that.
Yeah.
Best.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of that.
What would be 3 tips you would have for fellow narrators that are listening? If they want to make this a full-time income, what would your advice be to them?
Okay, so I'll use the standard industry response, which is take a book, lock yourself in a closet for 3 hours, read it. If you get out and you want to go back in, then proceed. Because a lot of people find they just can't sit still for that long. Now, I don't ever recommend being in the booth for more than an hour. I used to do it that way, but then I brought in one of those counters that reads the like air quality, and realized how bad the air quality gets after you're talking for an hour in a small enclosed space. I know, mind blowing. I'd never thought about it. But the carbon monoxide, dioxide, whatever it is, was astronomical. So yeah, that's another whole, we could do a whole podcast on that. But if you actually can sit there and remain focused for that long, that's, some people just have to move, and there's not a lot, you can do about that. Reading and listening. So not just listening to, but listening to whatever you like. Because then why do you gravitate towards that? Maybe that's something that you have a natural affinity for too. And then if you do like it, then you end up doing a lot of it, then you can do it sometimes better because you're actually into it. So form your own kind of point of view on things, and by listening, experiencing it, reading it. There's great online resources. Everyone always says that, but it is true. Like, if you're really into it, you'll find yourself kind of doing the Google research that you need to do. That's a good sign. Like, if you're sitting there scrolling, watching how-to videos, going to acx.com, which is Audiobook Creation Exchange. It's a good place for people to get kind of cut their teeth. There's a lot of scams on there, but there is ways that you can get involved in that. Befriending other people that have that same interest so you can learn from their knowledge. That's what was so lucky for me in my start out, because I was around engineers. I don't know anything about the technical side of things. I know enough now to do the bare minimum that I have to, but it's a whole other school of knowledge that you can go down the rabbit hole on. So really enriching yourself and learning that self-discipline of getting up and doing a session and then coming back and doing another one. And there are ways you can court publishers. There are events. There's a thing called the APAC, Audio Publishers Association Convention. Seriously, nowadays it's tougher because those things they're all happening online now. And the big good thing about those was that if you went in person, you would run into someone in the hallway that was the casting person for Penguin Random House and have a funny exchange, and next thing you know, you're doing a book for them. So that was a really good way to meet people. They do still have mixers. If you join SAG-AFTRA, which is the union, obviously you can't join until you get, it's that whole thing of you can't join until you get a lot of books, but you need to get books to join. But they do have mixers and ways that you can meet people face to face and have an exposure to the industry that way. And work on your social media presence as far as what is your brand. I like to think that mine is, kind of silly and goofy, not afraid to be serious, but on the same side, not like, and I also make little rules. Like, I don't post anybody else's stuff. I don't ever show a picture of my kids, just whatever you're comfortable with. But then start kind of using that and also by watching other people. There's other great narrators out there that are doing a lot. I know a guy, Travis Baldry. I'm going to give him a name drop. He does now on, I forget the name of it now, Discord, I think. He does his session, he broadcasts his session live. So he's in here recording, and anyone can drop by and watch him record. Like, whoo, the balls on that guy. Like, I used to think I was a tough guy for doing live readings where I just do the reading. But that to me is like, whoa, but I can also see the benefit, because like what we talked about with having the director in during the story, you kind of have to bring your A game if anybody can watch it anytime. And he always encourages his students to have an accountability partner, someone else that's starting out that they can talk to and have like, well, I did this week. And they're like, well, I did this. And it's a good way to be social about it and also learn from each other.
Those are phenomenal tips. Speaking of accountability, this is my favorite question to ask. What is the goal? What is the dream, the biggest, baddest dream that you were chasing in your career? I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Can I give you my second answer?
No, I want to hear the first and the second answer now.
Money. I mean, I want to be comfortable and live a life and have the things I want. And some of that comes out, I wasn't born into it and struggled for a large part of my life. So I think that, whoa, oh no, I dropped hold on. This is fun. There it is. I think that was the karma gods getting me for providing such a bourgeois
Such an honest
answer. But past that, the ability to live life in stories, and so to incite that kind of wonder that I feel. And if you're a part of that and you see other people get it, it feels like you're a conduit in some way. So it also takes kind of to me, it feels like a bigger purpose. So being able to do, invest in people and stories in a way that actually makes things a little better, or maybe brings somebody a little, like makes them a little calmer while they're driving, or makes them feel better, so that all the work I put in is towards some good as opposed to just money, the both sides of the coin, so to speak. That you have that ability to sustain yourself so I can be happy and take care of my responsibilities and be a good, productive member of society, and hopefully leave something to my kids in the future, and build something that's worthwhile in that realm. But to marry it with doing it in something that I truly enjoy and believe in, I think that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to do both those things with the same thing, which is just telling a story to somebody. It's so intimate and so old and ancient. It just feels like I keep, everyone talks about imposter syndrome. I keep people being like, wait, how do you make your living? No, okay, hold on. We have to hold on. We got to fix this. Like, it's pretty wonderful. I'm in a pretty special position, and I realize it, and I'm so grateful. So,
yeah.
But we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, and you also worked very hard to get there as well. So it doesn't just happen in one day.
Mm-hmm.
Work your tail off for it. So well done.
Takes time.
It does. I have a segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So basically, I've created a candle. I haven't created, I've lit the candle. I've created ambience, but it's 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I did look. Okay, yes, let's do it.
Right. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Meeting Neil Gaiman and sweating on his wife.
Love that one. What are 3 words that best describe you?
Watchful, particular, and enriching.
I knew you were going to use that one. That was the one that I was thinking. I'm like, he's going to say enriching for sure.
Call back.
At least we're consistent throughout this.
Mm-hmm.
What is the song that best describes you?
The one that I really like, that I want to be like, is Man on Fire by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. And I think that one, I may have it wrong, but my interpretation is it's somebody who's kind of spreading their passion to other people and then inflaming them, and then like watching that kind of take hold of that excitement, or being some sort of light for other people.
What is your life motto?
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right.
Beautiful. That's where that particular comes into.
Yeah, exactly.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
So many. It's hard to pick. I am really good at going out in my backyard and digging up rocks in what I call the back 40. I have this fascination with rocks. I love rocks, and I'm able to find where the rocks are and dig them out and then place them artfully around my house. So I'm a really good rock hound. And apart from that, I can do good voices, but I think people know that. So I can do, you want to hear, how about Elmo? That one's a good one.
Yeah.
I used to do that. That was a popular one when my kids were young. And now that they're older, there's like a switch, like around 9 or 10, that voice does not get the same respect it did when they were little. Now they just look at you like horrified. Like, please, you are an adult man. Do not do this.
I want to hear it now.
Elmo would love to be here, and he thanks you all for having him, and it's so good to talk about books with you.
right? Can you imagine being a 16-year-old daughter and your dad is doing that like in public? Like they're going to have therapy. I'm pretty sure they're already in it, but they'll have more.
For some reason, also, I feel like you would do really well coming off of that. What's his name? Lord of the Rings. You know
Gollum.
Yeah, the little. Oh my gosh!
Smeagol. Gollum loves it. I love the duality because he goes up here and then he's like,
It's like that's what I sound like in the morning. Actually, that's how I wake up. It's the low Gollum, and then by the end of the day, it's
Smeagol. He's so nice.
You start off the Smeagol before the coffee, and then your Elmo afterwards. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, exactly. And then by the end of the night, when I have a drink or two, then it's on to Mickey, and I'm like, oh, let's go to bed. Oh boy.
Do you find that when you're around home that you're always just spicing it up around just every second phrase is a different accent or play?
A lot of it's in my head. I've learned a lot of it's in my head. It may not be as appreciated by everybody else as it is by me. I try to choose key moments. If you can get the timing right, which is what comedy is, I can nail something and it'll be great. But I've learned as a man in your 40s, and you learn when to shut up. And I think that's the key thing. If I had to go back to myself and tell myself something when I was 20 years old, it'd be like, learn when to shut up.
I have had such a blast. What is coming out for you? What do we need to be on the lookout for? And where do we store you?
Facebook tends to be where I'm most a little bit, active. My Facebook page, which is just Luke Daniels VO, I think it's the professional artist page. And that's where I'll do the live readings. I've done a series recently that I'm really trying to pump up. It's a great urban fantasy series by an author named Justin S. Leslie. And they're called Max Abaddon. And they're fun because it's quirky, good characters. He's really good with keeping the dialogue and the action going. And these are ones that I'm self-producing with him. So part of that side stuff of having my own production company, and then I narrate, and then we split the profit. So those are always good to, if you want to support, go for one of those, Max Abaddon. And then I've got a lot coming out. I mentioned the Monarch one. Facebook, Instagram, we have Instagram, and then on Twitter, it's at Lucky, Lucky, Luke, Lukeekul. It's backwards. But I haven't been doing much on there. I have to start. I think that's my New Year's resolution, is to do a little bit more. It's hard. You get in the habit of it. And I was doing some, every Thursday we were doing a live reading. And I know I've got a few coming up, some mostly after the holidays in January. We'll do some more live readings, and then hopefully some giveaways, some new merch for the new year and that kind of stuff. So check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to get my hands on some of that merch. It looks banging.
Oh, of course.
Well, I am going to love you.
Yeah, banging.
But again, thank you so much for coming on. And who knows, watch this space. Maybe next year we'll get you back on.
All right. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Bye, guys.